Hello, YouTube. Just recently, we had an election in Canada. I listen to a lot of the politicians. I watch my Facebook and see people talk about, oh, the NDP will be better because they are more for the people and they'll do the spending in the right spot, or I like the Liberals because they'll do this and Conservatives will pull back on that. I listen to all their rhetoric, the Green Party, blah, blah, blah. None of them brought solutions. They all brought band-aids to solutions. If you want to talk about the Hegelian dialectic, they talk about like the problem and then they give their solution, but they don't give actual solutions. They give band-aids to solutions. Energy. One of the big things is energy. Energy is like, we're going to open up X amount of plants to actually facilitate the energy to individuals, but they're not talking about shipping of food. They're not talking about growing of food. That's a big problem. Healthy food. I'm not talking about genetically modified. I'm talking about food that grows, that actually brings nutrients and energy not just to the person but back into the soil. They never ever talk about independence of the individual. They always bring it back to dependence on the system and them being the representatives so they can talk in the grand scheme of this globalization. It's the system that is the problem. The system puts up blockades for individuals that are trying to become independent, whether it's through legal means or through building of their house or getting of their food or reclaiming their energy. The true solution would be to make each individual household independent of the system. I'm talking about water and all that. Like, when you go buy a house here where I live in Mississauga, you're paying for a 1,500 square foot house on a very small plot of land that's probably attached to somebody. Minimum, you're talking about $250,000. But you're dependent on the system. If you step out and just go a little further out, you can get a plot of land, say an acre of land, and what I've learned, if you manage that plot of land properly, you could grow enough food for 300 people. So even if you were to split that up and put 4 houses on that plot of land, you could grow food for, say, 100 people on that plot of land, and you could become independent of the system depending on what your house is built like. If it's built with solar, wind, geothermal, using the earth to actually heat and cool your house, like the earthships. I'm not talking about you have to have the design of the earthship. You could design your house. And anybody that's complaining about the design of those houses, I think are missing the point on actually becoming self-reliant and self-sufficient. Because the houses built nowadays, the designs that are built nowadays are built to actually become dependent on the system. They waste energy. They are inefficient on keeping people warm, keeping people cool. They're inefficient on getting rid of sewage, using water. You use way too much water. They don't reclaim the water. So if we started building neighborhoods or individual houses to become self-sufficient, and then utilizing the neighborhoods to become independent of the system, that to me is a solution. Not building a coal-powered energy plant, a nuclear power plant to bring energy to people, but bring it on source. Bring it to the people that live there. They are dependent of the system. If you build a house, you build it for, say, 50 years, you project it out 50 years, you put in the best quality equipment or the equipment that could fit into that house. The guys from Earthship said that you can build a house, well, people have built a house from $50,000 up to $250,000 that is totally independent of the system. You can still go out and buy your fruits and vegetables from grocery stores. You can still buy your steak from there, whatever. But you are independent of the system for your energy, your sewage, and your water. Nowadays we have wireless communication, so you can get your TV and your cell phone wirelessly. So if they took a quarter acre and they threw a house on there and built the land around it to actually permacultured it so people can go out and pick, instead of having like a birch tree, have like an apple tree or a pear tree, and build it so there's other plants that facilitate the growth of plants as well as bring in food to the individuals as well as the animals around there, and built those neighborhoods so they were independent of the system as well as the house of the system. That to me is a solution for our energy problems, our food problems, that's our financial problems. $250,000 for a house built to become sustainable makes more sense to me than building a $250,000 house jammed together with another house that becomes dependent on the system and drains the system for what it is. Politicians aren't there to facilitate the needs of individuals. They're there to facilitate the dependence of the individuals. But because we're so locked into the system and we're all in this Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, we believe that the politicians are there to help us. They may have been. They brought us to this level where we now can sit back and look at the system and say, oh, there's something wrong here. And now we can start to move forward on our independence of it. The problem is that the people that are dependent on us, being dependent on them, want to fight to keep us dependent on them. And their lies, and I don't even know if they're lies. I think they're lying to themselves. Like listening to a Barack Obama speech, you can hear all the logical fallacies that he is spitting out towards individuals to actually keep them locked in to the dependence on the system. And government is pushing for dependence. I'm not saying get rid of government. I'm not talking about saying government is good or bad. I think it's like every technology. It can be used for good and it can be used for bad. I think government, instead of ruling and governmenting people, like controlling the minds of people and moving them in the direction that government sees fit, I think that they should actually facilitate the individuals to become independent, which is totally against government. Make them independent of each other, but government is there to... I don't even want to use government. I don't even know what word it would be. But they would be there to facilitate the needs of the individual, meaning that they would be there to help people become independent, build those houses, build those neighborhoods, disconnect them from the energy sources, shut down the nuclear power plants and nuclear power plants and oil burning plants and water. Keep those going because they would facilitate us moving into independent on plots of land. There's farmland as far as the eye can see where I live. You could take that farmland and start building houses on there that have their own food production, their own energy production, and that would be a good use of the land instead of making a monocrop and using fuel or using chemical fertilizers that are built by gas and oil, or built by oil. Make the land independent of the system as well. Make it more of a multi-crop instead of, I can't even think of the words right now. It's kind of early. So I think the solution is to move forward and become independent of the system, not dependent on the system. And every time I hear a politician, they're not there to bring us independence. They're there to bring us dependence on them. And in actual fact, they're dependent on us. If we were to disconnect and not be, they wouldn't have as much power. So I think that's what they're afraid of, losing the power, and we are afraid of actually being independent of them because we're not sure that we can be independent. Taxation wouldn't be as high because we wouldn't need them to facilitate bringing energy and all that to us. We could take care of it ourselves. And say you just want a house that you live in that has all the energy needs and you can do whatever you want with it. You can make the choices. You can blah, blah, blah. You don't feel like to fix a solar panel. You can go out and get somebody within the neighborhood to repair it. That would be like your taxation. You would get the individual and you participate within getting them in there to fix your solar panels or your water reclamation or your sewage and that. Or you could learn how to do it yourself and become totally independent of them. So my biggest problem is the system itself, not necessarily government. I hate using that word government. And to use the word state means we're standing still. Government means to control minds. So what word would you use for those individuals? And having a representative being, for me, they don't know what I need and where I want it. They assume that, oh, he wants energy and he wants food and he wants this. They assume that them giving it to me is what I want. I want independence of that. I want to be able to walk outside my house and grab an apple and eat it. I want to be able to work in McDonald's and survive absolutely and fully. McDonald's would be there to just, I'm not saying that I want to work at McDonald's, but I'm saying having a minimum wage paying job should be enough to have us living like kings with the technology we have and not being indebted to anybody. Building neighborhoods that facilitate themselves, that are independent themselves, building houses that are independent themselves from the system, but are actually sharing their resources with the neighborhoods, I think is the best way to go, is the best step to go. We still need the resources in the beginning from the system that we have, the centralized system, but as we move into independence, we could start sharing our resources, our excess. Because if you have 100 houses on 50 acres, or 25 acres for Christ's sakes, on 25 acres you have 100 houses that all the food in that is grown. You have people that take care of that neighborhood, that fix and grow, and you know who those individuals are. You build the system that, kind of like a gated community or the commune or whatever you want to call it, but it's a neighborhood within it. There's no walls up. There's nothing that blocks you off from coming back to the old system. It's just that this neighborhood is now independent. And once that neighborhood is independent, you could start to utilize the energy from that neighborhood if they are willing to. Not everyone has to, but some can. Say, use that energy to start making the older neighborhoods more self-sufficient. Either start buying up unused land, or buying up those houses and retrofitting them, or even demolishing them and rebuilding them to become more self-sufficient. You could do that over many, many years, and the technology is there. We could use a lot of the waste products that we have and become more efficient and more self-reliant. So the problem is the system wants us to become dependent on them, and we want to become independent of them, or we need to become independent of them. Anyways, that's it. I got nothing else.